I'm standing here in the heart of Westminster. I'm outside the Lords doing my Inside the Lords, and obviously extraordinary events have happened in the last week. It's really busy around here, it's packed, there's loads of people everywhere milling around, even though everything's also shut. And they've built a big pavilion just overnight, which is, I think, where various dignitaries will be for the funeral, which is in Westminster Abbey, which is what we're standing outside of. Anyway, hello. Since the conversation I had last week, the Queen actually died, and I kind of had that conversation as we knew she was gravely ill. So you've all followed that. I hardly need to reiterate it. I wanted to just talk about what it's been like, I suppose, having a privileged position, being at the heart of it. So I was able to go to the declarations, and that's where the leader of the House of Commons and the leader of the House of Lords make declarations about the Queen's death to the new monarch, Charles III, and Queen Consort Camilla, and all parliamentarians were invited. And a number of things to say about it. I'm a Republican, everybody kind of knows I'm hardly a kind of major royalist, so what was I doing there? So I was kind of consoled when I walked in that, you know, lots of people over in the MPs boxes particularly were Republicans too, and I think that we weren't there disingenuously. We were there because it's an important historic occasion and to show our respects. And the sense of history was overwhelming because we were in the extraordinary Westminster Hall. But to give you some sense of the fact that democracy is a complicated matter, there we were as subjects of the King, swearing allegiance to the King in many regards, and actually this was the place where we had the trial of Guy Fawkes, where we had the trial of Charles I, and we know what happened to him, and also of Thomas More. You know, this is like I had a sense of that. It's also the case that, and I thought this was very respectful, that the Speaker of the House of Commons made a joke about the fact that the Queen had given her declaration on the anniversary of the Great Revolution. As he said, only in Britain could you have a Queen celebrating the Revolution and there being declarations. I think there's something in that, and I have to say that King Charles did acknowledge very much, in a rather humble way that I wasn't expecting, that he respected democracy and he was there in Parliament, and Parliament ran the country. Now, whatever one thinks, I was glad to hear the acknowledgement of that, and that seemed to me to be an important corrective to what can feel like a royal jamboree where you're just never allowed to criticise the royal family or anything at the moment. So I thought that was the rightful thing. In terms of me personally, I was so nervous about the declaration. You'd think I was doing the declaration. I went ridiculously early, you know, it started at 10, I was there at 9:15. Actually, there was a lot of people in front of me, and the doorkeepers, who realised that I was a bit anxious, said, oh, you know, sit anywhere, Lady Fox, you know, blah, blah. And I kind of sat a bit back because I didn't want anyone to think, why is she in the front? And so I sat a bit back, and then this awful, mortifying thing occurred, which was that the seats in front of me filled up and the seats behind me filled up. Nobody sat on my row. And I was like, oh my God, the humiliation. And I have to give credit to some Labour peers who tapped me on the shoulder, sitting behind me, and I can assure you that they're people that I have had lots of rows with over the time, and said, it's happened to all of us, don't worry, and are you all right, and chatted. And I really was grateful. That was an act of solidarity I wasn't expecting. And then, and I want to give credit, and even show his book, Leslie Turnberg, Lord Turnberg, who I've actually known for a very long time, who's a fantastically important medical expert. He's in the House of Lords and has spoken at the Battle of Ideas Festival over the years, and is the author of Beyond the Balfour Declaration. Lord Turnberg turned back when he saw I was sitting on my own and came and sat by me, and then the row filled up, and that was just to his credit. And I'm, as a consequence, going to go and read Beyond the Balfour Declaration the next week or so, because I thought that was an act of great generosity on his part, made me feel less anxious. Talking of like feeling anxious, I just went to see the Queen lying in state, and yes, as a parliamentarian we queue jumped so I could just go in. I went, and I was actually rather nervous doing that, but you know, I was just there with the rest of the public. And when we actually got to the coffin, various people were curtsying and everything, and I didn't really know what to do. So I did a sign of the cross. It's some kind of instinctive. So, you know, once a Catholic, it all comes out. But I was trying to be respectful, and I just didn't know what to do. And I think that's the way a lot of people feel, but I think giving respect in that way is important. Obviously, one of the difficulties at a time like this is that politics is suspended. So a bit of gossip from inside the Lords, which is the day that the Queen died, was the day where the junior ministers in the House of Lords were due to be sacked and appointed, as it were, by the new Prime Minister Liz Truss. So it was a day of anxieties before anything occurred, everyone waiting to find out. Of course, once the Queen died, that was that. And so what we now have is a whole series of junior ministers in as much as they're in the House of Lords, but nonetheless with responsibilities, who don't know whether they've got a job or not. And this is not a sympathy call for them. Don't know who the new ministers are. And the civil servants apparently are not giving any work to the old ministers they don't know. So just to use an example, the minister in charge of transport at a very time when transport's crucial to making the whole this whole royal funeral happen smoothly, doesn't exist. I mean, she's not able to do anything because the civil servants can't use an old minister when they don't know who the new one is. I know that this is a necessary part of the process because, you know, this has been planned for a long time, what would happen. It's the first time for, you know, since 52 or whatever that we've had to do this, and nobody's quite sure what to do. But on the other hand, I think that there are some important democratic things being lost here. You know, there is no doubt about it that whilst history dictates certain things, and respecting tradition and following all of that etiquette is one thing, some of the contemporary issues are very modern. I mean, the police do not have, it's not written in some traditional handbook that you have to arrest somebody because they've got an anti-monarchy sign up. I mean, it's not even as though King Charles said arrest anyone. I mean, arresting people for criticising the head of state is the sort of thing you associate with North Korea or wherever, and it's completely dangerous to let that happen, even if I think it's a stupid way of protesting. And I wish that Republicans had made their case more forcefully before the Queen died, rather than waiting for her to die and then turning up with a placard. I mean, it seems a bit pointless. And the typical reaction is very modern too, which is a whole range of Republican, you know, my peers, if you want, on the left have suddenly said, oh, where are all the free speech warriors now that people are being, you know, the right to protest being used, compromised? In fact, everyone has been saying it shouldn't happen. But the police use a modern idea of offence using tradition. Also, why is everything closing down? It's fine that there's a bank holiday, and you know, if your employers let you come to London to go and queue up, that's fine. But operations cancelled, funerals cancelled, you know, never mind Centre Parks making a mess of their PR. We're in a situation now where it's the lockdown, a very contemporary moment, that's informed how we react, which is to assume that you have to close everything down. And I think that there's a real danger of that. And when you think about politics at the moment, one gets a feeling that although there is a really positive atmosphere of solidarity, and that's, I think, why people are coming together and you know, queuing up without complaint and appreciating that this is a time when, no matter how toxic things are, somehow something bigger than us exists. As it's not even so much shared grief as a shared kind of knowledge that, you know, we're in the UK, we all can see that this is something that's part of our history and so on. There's also a kind of calm before the storm. You know, there's a kind of real sense that what are we going to do about the energy crisis, the cost of living crisis, and so on and so forth. And I just do not like the fact that I was told yesterday that effectively the Lords won't be back till the 10th of October. No decision will be made. I don't even know what legislation is going to be discussed then. And that's scary because it means that you know, the country is not exactly in a situation where it can just suspend politics because we've got so many challenges. And I was really reminded of that because the reason I didn't do an Inside the Lords after the Queen died was because I was in Lithuania, and I was speaking at the European Cultural Parliament, which is not, by the way, an EU body, but a gathering of artists and intellectuals from around Europe. I was there in Lithuania, and I was with a number of people from Ukraine. They were, you know, they're right next door to Russia. There's a lot of, and they were all fascinated by the Queen dying, but the Ukrainian war hadn't stopped. I mean, on the one hand, as we know, the Ukrainian forces have won a fantastic victory, but also there's some terrible reactions from Russia going on. And I just thought, you know, politics doesn't stop just because there's a royal funeral and the Queen has died. And I actually, it was very sobering to be there, where they could watch on what was happening in the UK, but also reminded me that there are important matters beyond the fact that the Queen has died. And I think we all can't forget that, even if we show our respect. So the only other thing to say is that I got my royal seal, and I'm about to go and show that to you in a minute, because that was like an important historic moment for me. So resume in part two. So part two. Only last week I received an email saying that I was now officially a Baroness, which gave me a bit of a shock, because obviously I feel like I've been one for 2 years. But what they meant was that I now had the royal seal of approval, and I didn't even know what that meant. And then they said, pick up the box in the basement or whatever. Anyway, I've got my box, right? And because it's now the week that the Queen died, it seems like sort of more symbolic and important. So it's quite a nice red box. And then inside it, we have this seal from Her Majesty the Queen, and this scroll, which I haven't even opened, that's being opened for you for the first time. And it's the scroll saying that I am a Baroness, and it's on vellum. And the reason why this took so long, here we go. There we go. I don't even know what it says. Elizabeth II. And there I am, Claire Regina Fox, Baroness Fox of Buckley. So I've literally only seen it now, right? And this is signed. So that's fascinating to me. But the thing that you have to notice about this is it's on vellum. I got it 2 years late. Why is that? Because of the lockdown. I mean, the lockdown did incredible things. There was a worldwide shortage of vellum. And that's why it's taken 2 years for those of us who were brought in to the House of Lords to get it. I didn't realise that vellum was I thought it was just paper, but apparently it's kid or something. I don't really understand. Anyway, I whatever I think about the House of Lords, and we all know that I think it should be abolished, and all of those things are true, I quite like having this, and I'll be, you know, that's quite nice, let's be honest. I keep thinking of my mum, of course, and my mum and dad, and they would be bemused beyond bemused to have this as Irish immigrants to this country. Partly proud, partly think it was ludicrous, but there you go. But anyway, I think, as I've said, that one of the big significant points about the Queen dying and everything is that sense of history. And I don't mean that history should weigh down on us. Actually, we should see history as not in, you know, an objective factor, but something that changes all the time, and everything will change now that the Queen has died. There's no straightforward continuity. The royal family will have to renegotiate 2022, and also we, as citizens, not subjects, have a role in shaping history. But one of the problems, as I've said previously, is that often we don't understand, or we're historically illiterate. We don't appreciate the weight of history, what it means in terms of any particular time. So I was particularly glad to receive Andrew Doyle's new book, The New Puritans, which is how the religion of social justice captured the Western world, in which Andrew, importantly, I think, looks at how Puritanism, what its historic origins are, and what the new version of it might be, and uses history, uses the literature of the time to really try and understand both the past and then the way it weighs down on, or the way it's reinterpreted in the future, and how history, as we know, is often cancelled, used in a way to narcissistically talk about ourselves. So I'm Andrew Doyle's book, which I've only just started, is a great addition, I think, to an important body of literature. Andrew is actually going to be speaking about his book at the Battle of Ideas, which will also try and both understand everything in the context of historically specific moments, but also update it and dig behind the headlines, and that's at the Battle of Ideas Festival. And the Battle of Ideas Festival is here at the heart of Westminster, the 15th and 16th of October at Church House in Westminster, a place where, in history, as it happens, the House of Commons and the House of Lords had to meet in the Second World War because there was such fear of bombing of the palaces of Westminster that had been so all over the press. This is if you want, a people's parliament. This is an attempt at saying, let's have a public square in which everyone is engaged. And I really hope that you'll come along. It's a public event. There's 100 panel discussions. It's a battle of ideas, not in the sense of for and against and silly kind of debates, but in which we really try and grapple with some of the ways that we have to win hearts and minds, all of the controversial, but also interesting, challenging issues, from the energy crisis to, enough is enough and whether the trade unions can do anything, through to some of the contentious issues around gender identity and a whole lot in between. So please come along, because that's what it's about. It's about us having conversations with each other. Whatever happens in the House of Lords, it's not as important as what happens outside it, as I always say. So we've still got a few days left of the early bird, which we extended because the Queen died, and just to give people a chance. So I really hope that you will buy your tickets, and that I'll see you at the Battle of Ideas Festival. And you can either access all of the details via our Substack, which is kind of quite new for the Academy of Ideas and myself, or just by the Battle of Ideas website. So see you the 15th and 16th of October in London, and we actually have a version in Buxton on the 5th of November.